Love it. So as you can see, we have some very skilled and experienced advisors with us today for this conversation. So let me start, Evan, with you. You've advised, as you mentioned, in many areas within international education. Could you tell us about a skill you gained, for example, problem solving or something else, while you were advising with international students that really that you need to apply in your role now within education abroad?
So I think that the biggest skill that I've gained in advising international students that has really carried over into my current role within education abroad is the ability to adapt my advising mantra based on the students that I am advising. Obviously, no two students are the same, and oftentimes I am finding myself explaining the same concept to a first-generation student that I might to a student who's had two parents attend university. And so this is the same as when I was advising international students, even now as I manage both of our inbound as well as our outbound exchange students. I have to be able to adapt what I'm saying in order to ensure that my audience that I'm speaking to understands all of this information being provided to them. So advising international students from different countries with different backgrounds and different concepts of how things work parallels the domestic students that I currently advise and the diverse backgrounds that they each bring to our advising session. So really, I find that it's all about clear communication, being able to listen, and being able to adapt your thinking to your audience members who are sitting before you.
Perfect. Thank you, Evan. Eric, let me ask you the same question kind of in reverse. You started with education abroad, right, and in international enrollment management now. So could you tell us about, similar to what Evan said, advising skills that you've gained while starting in EA and shifting to the other side?
Sure. So what I have learned is that using the skills that I took from education abroad was really about adaptability, which Evan has mentioned, but I thought of it in a slightly different way. And I think of adaptability in terms of adapting to the pace of work throughout an academic year and the different cycles of work. I think for those who advise in education abroad, we sort of understand and maybe even take for granted what those cycles are. And maybe don't think a lot about what does that look like if you're advising on the ISSS side. And so when I think about adapting to that work cycle, it's really the ability to anticipate those peaks and valleys of your work. So where are the pressure points at the different times through the year, and how does that impact not only the way that you work directly with your students and support them, give them the time that they need, but then to also think about, project-based work and when you can do some of that deeper work. And being realistic and being able to set those timelines and expectations. And I think of that as transferring to ISSS, because again, if you think about an education abroad advisor and an ISSS advisor, at the beginning of a school year, the education abroad advisor might be really busy doing a lot of outreach, doing classroom presentations, probably preparing for an upcoming study abroad fair that's going to happen in a few weeks. So it's a really busy time. Similarly, with an ISSS advisor, they're also quite busy, but it's a bit different, right? They're doing CBIS registration, they're doing orientation, they are dealing with current students who might be, asking for curricular practical training or needing a reduced course load. And so the actual work itself might be slightly different, but the pace of that work, and again, that ability to be adaptable according to the sort of rhythm of the academic year and using that to anticipate and plan your work and prioritize accordingly, I think is a very transferable skill between those two areas.
Eric, let's build off of this for a second. So you've touched on it through your response there, but let me ask, how have you applied your advising skills then to other roles or positions you've had or currently hold?
Yeah, that's a great question and a great way to build off of that. So I think going from the position of an advisor, and then, I have gone through the position of a coordinator, an assistant, an associate, and then a director position. So in each of those roles, I have assumed more and more responsibility for leadership and supervision. to the point where, in a director role, that is a bulk of what my focus is on a day-to-day basis. And I often lament the fact that I regret that I don't have that one-on-one time with students, because they are my passion and they are why I ever got into this work. But as I have contemplated that, and as I've negotiated that over the years, what I have learned upon reflection is that a lot of those skills that I had assumed and developed and honed as an advisor have translated really well into, I think, what I see to be an effective leader and a sort of nourisher and mentor of my staff now. I find myself deploying a lot of those similar skills around communication, listening, creating an environment of support and well-being and care for that, be that the student or now my staff members, and sort of creating that space. So yeah, again, it wasn't something immediately obvious to me. It took reflection through the years as I sort of moved further away from that one-on-one student interaction. And but I definitely have found that is a very transferable skill in that experience.
I love that. Geeta, I'd love to ask you the same question, because you really are focused on advising. So how have you applied these advising skills to the other roles and positions that you've held?
Great. That's a great question. That, first of all, I have, as we know, the advising skills is something that you build over time. So when I took the job as an advisor for freshmen, you go in there, you do the best you can, but then you learn along the way, right? As you learn with experiences, as you're dealing with a variety of students, and you learn as you deal with many challenges. So that to me was an excellent learning experiences. And the skills that I built along the way, being a freshman advisor, my intercultural communication skills, my interpersonal, my intracultural skills. And so I would say also what is very important in advising, which I started to build very early in my freshman advising position, is to be a mentor to my student. So this is a skill now that I'm able to transfer and apply that to my team. So I am a mentor actually to my junior advisors right now. So I was able to another skill that I transferred over as coordinator of advising is being a coach to my students and being a coach to my team members as well. And the problem solving skills, that's never ending, of course. And so that you'll have that with your students all the time. But I help and assess my my junior team right now whenever they are having a very challenging time, and it's basically how to solve this issue. And so I'm able to help them. So definitely what I have learned, these are transferable skills in my current position as being the coordinator of advising. And what it has also helped me is to have also the opportunity now to work very closely with the Office of International Program. So the advising skills have helped me to work collaboratively with other departments on campus to better advise our international students.
Okay, I'm glad that you said that. It's so true, right? That cross-campus or cross-institutional collaboration is critical for the success of any of us. So I appreciate that. Eric, I'm going to come back to you for a second. Of course, gaining these skills happens over time and through experience and just day-to-day work. But let me ask, in addition to that, what professional development opportunities have you taken advantage of to move beyond your role of advisor into the other positions you've held?
Yeah, sure. Another great question. Thank you, Chad. When I started in the field, I was in a nascent education abroad office and was the very first study abroad advisor that the institution had ever had. And so I was sort of immediately propelled to be thinking of, I need to find how to develop myself because there's not a lot here. So I immediately looked externally, and in my very first year in the position at the very first NAFSA Region 4 conference I attended, I presented. And I continued to really use the NAFSA region, and particularly the conference itself, as a place to network, to present, and really just to get to know my colleagues, because they were people who I had easier access to, right? I mean, if they're just down the road, it's much easier to connect with them on a more regular basis. And so I really made that a goal of mine, especially in those early years. And then we all know the feeling of going to the first NAFSA national conference, and how overwhelming and frightening that might be. So I went through that process, but I, on the other side, said that I'm going to make this a productive use of my time. And so I started engaging more in the leadership side of things as the years went by. And so I serve as a state representative in Region 4 now, and of course on Trainer Corps. And so I just think searching out those growth opportunities and using an organization like NAFSA to support yourself, but also as a way to give back at some point, I think is really rewarding, and for me has been a core to my professional development. And the same would be true of other organizations that are out there, dare I name them, Forum and AIRC and others. The final thing I would say too is that I mentioned this earlier, have an interest in research-based practice. And so I've always been very thoughtful to try and build relationships with faculty members wherever I'm at, or to find key partners on my campus who would engage in various research studies or even just writing an article. And so that has been the other thing that I have tried to focus on. And of course, finding time to do that is always the challenge. But that's where anticipating work cycles and finding the space within my day-to-day, I just have made that a priority. So
perfect. Eric, thank you. Evan, I'm going to bounce the same question to you. You've been in different roles within international education for sure, but what have you done in terms of professional development, the opportunities that you've sought out to move beyond where you've started?
So I think that, it probably all began, with my very own study abroad experience in Istanbul, Turkey, to becoming an English teacher in the Republic of Georgia, doing international student recruiting in Southeast Asia. So there's a lot of places to begin, but I do value and attend NAFSA conferences every year. I'm also a member of NAFSA's Trainer Corps. When I used to work at a university in Illinois, I did work to develop content and marketing for the very first ever Lessons from Abroad Chicago. So that was a very unique experience to bring Lessons from Abroad to Chicago, to the greater area, not just the state of Illinois. I currently do also sit on ISEP's Council of Advisors, giving advice to this organization, this International Student Exchange Program, for best practices within the field. I also spent a lot of time attending several statewide workshops, not necessarily in my state. I'm working in South Carolina. I used to travel to North Carolina quite often to attend workshops on F1 and J1 visa advising, among several others. And I was also fortunate enough to actually work directly with NAFSA to develop curriculum for an Education Abroad CEP workshop, Critical Skills for the Education Abroad Advisor, which I think is a new name since we first developed it several years ago. I've also had the opportunity to train that at the last conference we had in person in Washington, D.C. And now I'm currently sitting as the dean for that particular workshop. So I've gotten to know NAFSA and a lot of different organizations quite a bit throughout everything that I've been able to volunteer and just attribute my time to.
Perfect. So now we're getting to the question that I am super excited to ask. And Evan, I'll start with you, and then Geeta, I'll come to you after that. What advice or reminders would you like to give to others in the field about the value of continuing to strengthen your advising skills and practices?
Yeah, so I think that learning how to advise in all of these different knowledge communities really opens up, job prospects later on in life. As I, mentioned, I really started out in ISSS, but also did training and education abroad. And so when that time came, I was able to make that jump from one side of international education to the other. I also value trainings because students aren't necessarily these stagnant creatures. I too, as well as Gita, teach courses at my institution and realize that students are ever changing, and especially throughout generations. So some of the best advice that I can give to other professionals in the field is to look for opportunities for free training. I spent several years in the early part of my international education career seeking out opportunities that actually paid me for my help and my advice. So that allowed me to help to continue developing within this field without putting a financial strain on my institution for how involved that I chose to be. So I always like to highlight that if you look for those opportunities, they do exist out there. And that is really a key component of what I love about this field, and just trying to stay involved at a low cost to my institution.
Love it. Thank you. And Gita, what about you?
Yes, thanks, Evan. I think that's a great question, Chad. I can't stress enough the importance of making learning your lifelong goal, because it's never ending. There's always something new to learn about advising. So there's no dull day where you say, oh, I knew that. Oh no, there's always something new to learn about advising. So the more we take opportunities to get the training, whether it's costly or whether it's free, it's well worth it. I have to say NAFSA has been so beneficial to me, and being a part of Trainer Court have actually helped me a lot, in my profession, okay? To serve my students, but also I sort of have become the little expert, as we say, in offering cross-cultural training program on campus. So I work collaboratively, with the Office of International Program, and put together and implement cross-cultural training program for our domestic and international students, because we see the importance of cross-cultural learning, especially in this day and age. And so, and I think the being able to learn more, about the field of international education and advising opened the door for you. It opened the door for future opportunities as well. So, but just to keep in mind a little tip about advising itself, just the role as an advisor, I think we can never be 100% prepared for unforeseen circumstances. Just perfect example is the pandemic, right? But if we learn to be flexible, patient, compassionate, ethical, unbiased, and being a good listener, I think we can really serve our students, in a very effective and efficient way. So to keep that in mind, I would say serving a diverse group of students and scholars is very enriching. But at the same time, to enjoy this experience, I believe that advisors have to acquire the knowledge about work cultures, understand them, and what is a better way to do that than through continuing education.
Thank you. So Evan, Gita, Eric, thank you so much for this conversation today and for sharing your insights, perspectives, and experiences with us. Again, we want to thank you for your volunteer leadership in Trainer Corps and in NAFSA, and for sharing your expertise with the rest of us in all you are doing in the front lines of really teaching and training for our entire field. For everyone listening, to learn more about upcoming opportunities to strengthen your own advising practices and your continued professional learning opportunities, please check out and bookmark www.nafsa.org/workshops. Again, thank you all for your time today. Thank you for your commitment and your volunteer service. Have a great day, everyone.